found yourself wondering why your shitty S13 subframe causes your steering rack to over-center constantly? Well, here at Center Track Fabrication, we like to resolve that issue. Get yourself a fresh rack, one that's preferably straight. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna slice her, we're gonna dice her, and we're gonna feed her some ricer. These holes are a good indication of how far we need to move this rack forward. What we will do is remove approximately 1 inch from the center of this rack, moving these pickup points from the edge here to the edge here. Normally during a drift car build, one will purchase modified or shortened knuckles. Causes a condition where the LCAs, or excuse me, the pickup points on the knuckle are now forward and the rack is aft of the pickup points. In order to realign that, we move the subframe forward slightly, thus not allowing the binding or over-centering of the tie rods.
So essentially it's like drop knuckles, but for your steering rack. It makes everything back like to how it should be.
Yeah, you're realigning the rack with the pickup points on the knuckle.
How the Nissan man's designed it.
Yes, not quite, but closer at least.
So in this video, we're going to show you how to do that.
This doesn't have to be as accurate as you would think. I know when I first started doing this, I was super paranoid about having it like, 1/16 of an inch off. Honestly, won't make that big of a difference. So first step is choose your weapon. In my case, I will use the Ferrari of plasma cutters, Hypertherm PowerMax 45. In your case, probably an angle grinder. Now, I always say when plasma cutting, have your PPE on, or your personal protective equipment. Wrap it up, kids. Kids are expensive. That's 100% true. That's good. I mean, I didn't learn. You're roughly 1 inch out of there. We're going to take this and we're going to follow this edge around this side of the rack on either side. Okay? Pretty smoky in here, So once you get your top cut out, and it can look like shit, trust me, because it's going to be fine. And you cut down along the sides, which we're going to clean up, as long as we got a nice, decently clean cut. And you can do this with an angle grinder and a zip wheel or a cutoff wheel. It just takes forever, and the plasma cutter is probably not the cleanest way to do it. Freehanding it like this, however, it is the fastest for sure. See this lower portion of this hole, and it goes right over to here. We're going to pretty much take the same distance out of the top on the bottom, and you might have some slight overlap, or you might have a slight gap. If you end up doing it and you have a big gap, don't freak out. You can easily patch it, like put a big piece of plate on it or a small piece of plate, stiffen it right back up. This stuff isn't super thick to begin with. I wouldn't be too worried about beefing it up a little bit. Line that shit up right there. Got your 2 halves, and we're saving weight. See how I'm using these holes as a reference?
The very top of the hole.
Yep, very top of the hole. Now you're like, oh my God, Charles, how could you possibly ever align this again? It'll never be the same. Measure the face of this to the face of this, and you make it even. It's square again. Doesn't matter how you slice it. Don't panic. Don't panic. Everybody stay calm. What you are going to have to do, though, in order to get this to fit properly, is you're going to have to take a pretty beefy flap disc, clean all this up, and try and prep it as well as you can from welding. We're going to be TIG welding ours. You don't have to do that. You could probably easily, MIG this. I would recommend if you're going to be trying to flux core it or stick weld it, don't do this. And like I said, you don't have to have a plasma cutter. It just makes it a shitload faster if you're gonna cut it up. It does reduce the overall rack size, what we're gonna be shooting for. is roughly 1.5 inches from the face here to the back where the rack mounts. That's a good frame of reference. Do you have any questions that you would want to ask me if you were watching this?
So essentially right now, there's no difference.
Right now, see, like if you're sitting right here,
where does the difference come in?
when we weld it, re-weld it forward.
Put it like you're gonna weld it.
I will once I clean it, it'll sit.
Oh, so it kind of overlaps?
Yeah, you're gonna clean the bottom of this and it's gonna sit slightly up and forward. It's gonna sit kind of like,
Okay.
that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what that does is that slight up isn't as big of an issue as the front to back is an issue.
Yeah.
And once you get those pickup points aligned, and most people, when they modify knuckles, if you watch my video on my channel, I'll show you how to modify knuckles. You take about 1 inch to 1.25 inches out of a set of knuckles. So in theory, you're removing material from the knuckles, and now you're realigning the rack with the knuckles. Number one rule, kids, is to have a clean shop. Clean work environment is good for the soul. You know, cleaned up the edges. We're gonna go ahead and wire wheel this as well and get the rest of the paint off, but we wanted to get a nice, relatively clean surface so that we can start, you know, have a nice place to start with welding. And we've also went ahead and beveled the edges of some of these thicker parts. These thin sheet metal parts don't really require it. However, where there's a bunch of weldment already there, we went ahead and beveled it so we can get some good penetration. One keynote that I can tell you when you go to do this, if you're a little overzealous when you cut this portion on the sides, you can end up with a pretty meaty gap. And I have found that worst case scenario, if you get a large gap, you can add some material back. But I would just say be careful when you're cutting the ends and removing and straightening the either plasma cutter or however you get it cleaned up. I wouldn't take too much material off the ends, and hopefully I don't take too much material off the ends because I don't feel like being here all night trying to fix my mistakes. So what I'm gonna do, what I normally do is I'll set it up like this, and you can see, yes, it is above this now, but it's only 1/8 of an inch, not even, above the actual rack where it was at in this previous location. Once we get this measured front to back, down the sides, and left to right, we will go ahead and get a couple tacks on it. Maybe put a little bit of weld here and there, just so that we have it solid. We're going to continue to shape the front of this now that we, you know, have the general fit and finish, and kind of clean it up, and then we'll TIG weld it the rest of the way out. Let me grab a tape. So that's roughly 1.5 inches total distance, and we just want to come over here, flip this around, kind of use the square and see how it's pretty much even. We might have to adjust it out ever so slightly to get it perfect, but roughly 1.5 inches from the face to the back. Pretty dead nuts. So that's good. And then we want to come over here and we want to make sure that these aren't perfectly shaped, but we want to make sure that they are pretty close. The rack itself, you know, obviously once it's in there, you're going to want to center the rack perfectly and then adjust the tie rods to the bench. You can't do this without an alignment, by the way, don't. So roughly 2 inches on that side and 2 inches on this side. That's with me eyeballing it with the plasma cutter and then cleaning it up with the grinder. So like I said, you don't have to have it perfect. You want to get it pretty close. Now once we get a couple tacks on it, we are going to check it again to make sure that it isn't gone fucky somehow. After that, we're going to clean it up the rest of the way and add metal if we need to add metal to the bottom side. I'm not going to touch it right now because I want it to stay aligned. You're almost there. You're almost done already. It wasn't even that bad. We're going to be welding this with ER70S2, the TIG equivalent to MIG rod. In MIG, or in most MIG machines, it's going to be ER70S6. Mild steel's fine. We don't need to use anything exotic to weld this out. So now that we have this little piece of plate here, we're going to go ahead and clean this side and the back side up, and we're also probably going to round these corners and probably take a little bit off this side. We don't need a whole bunch of beef on this on the back, so Doesn't look nice though. No need for that beef, son. We probably should clean this first before we tack this down. TIG welding requires the material to be pretty clean. And you can see where I was talking about earlier, you would have to re-notch these holes out because your spot where you would be putting the socket through wouldn't fit. So this one time I was using the old wire death wheel, and I walk over to Chappie, and he looks at me and looks at my eyes, and his eyes get all wide, and he goes, "You got a wire in your eye, get the magnet!" And I'm like, "Ah!" And I run to the bathroom, and he had to pull the wire out of my eye with the magnet.
PPE.
PPE. Brillo. Fun fact, I almost went to prison. Now that we got our fucking piece of shit fucking thing, we're gonna weld it in. Try and get this all nice and lined up. I'm gonna pick a happy medium between a little bit of gap on this side and a little bit of gap on this side, so I'm not filling a ton of shit. This would be super easy with a MIG welder. You could just run fat bead on either side. Since we're going old school, it's gonna take me a minute. A good welding tip while putting your subframe back together is to tack it in several locations and not weld continuously across long sections. This sheet metal will warp, it will distort. You need to move the heat around as much as you can. I'm not saying weld 1/4 of an inch and stop. I'm saying don't weld the whole 8 inches out, because there's just no way you would get from here to here and not have distortion. All right, so now we've got the top primarily welded out. This came out pretty good. The bottom didn't come out as great because I didn't clean it. And you can see where things are clean, they go great. Where they're not so clean, not so great. So that's not really a huge structural issue on this. It's already gonna be crazy strong. But we are gonna knock these down because we didn't quite get these flush originally. And then we're gonna wire wheel them and clean them, and then we're pretty much done. I went ahead and welded out the bottom. Like I said, I might go back and touch it up, but we'll do a brief overview after I knock these down and weld them out. On the bottom here, where we welded in this plate, we need to now notch the area so that we can still yeah. That ain't gonna work. Probably see the hole down in there. We need to be able to get a 17 mil socket down in there. Need more room. Make sure that the sockets go in and out. It's good and strong. Got some nice clean welds on top. That's really it.
And now, you slap a coat of spray paint on it.
Yeah, you paint her up real nice. Take her out to a nice seafood dinner. And hope you never have to take her back out again.
Alright, so that's the end of the video. We're gonna paint this tomorrow because we want to go back to the house and chill. And it's too hot to paint right now, so we're just gonna do it later. I'm gonna head home tomorrow, but I will be back down here.
Yes.
I want to give a huge thanks to Charles. So if you guys would feel so inclined, go follow his channel and check out his Instagram. Hit him up if you need any fabrication stuff.
Absolutely.
Because he can do a lot of it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.